The Rings of Power. There were some things in this episode that I actually thought were promising, and if anything, that kind of makes the show even more frustrating for me. The episode showed some real promise. It actually made me feel something in places, and by the end, it managed to lose me so badly that I fell asleep again. That's 2 episodes in a row now where that has happened, and recently I've even had trouble sleeping at night, just not it appears while watching The Rings of Power. So, wasted potential, maybe not a great example of TV, but it appears to be very functional as a cure for insomnia. There should be a lot of potential here. The money they had, they've got Lord of the Rings, and it mostly just gets wasted. Once again, they brought in more very talented actors and then barely did anything with them. For example, later on in the episode there's a scene with 2 Ents. Tree people.
Winter bloom nourished many of those trees from seed and sprout. Do not ask her to speak more of it.
They are no different from them!
And now you've seen them. Can you tell me who's playing them? Yes, no. I mean, the actors did a fine enough job, but that's Jim Broadbent and Olivia Williams. Jim Broadbent was briefly in Game of Thrones, he was in Hot Fuzz, he was Bridget Jones's dad, he's been acting since 1971. This is the sort of actor I'd really want to see in the main cast. Olivia Williams was in The Sixth Sense, she's been acting since 1992. These are serious actors and they give them so little to work with. You don't even get to see their faces. They also have Kieran Hines in the cast, who's a fine actor. He was Mance Rayder in Game of Thrones. In this, he's playing a non-character called Dark Wizard. I say it was promising because we start off with Elrond and Galadriel and their company of elves going to Eregion to warn the elven smith Celebrimbor about Sauron, the Lord of all evil. Infiltrating his city to make rings that will bind all the creatures of Middle-earth to his will. So, being in a real hurry, in a race against time, they give them horses, right? Wrong. They go on foot. This show is so dumb. They maybe wanted to ape shots like this from the Peter Jackson Lord of the Rings without understanding why they were like that. They had to go over mountains and take back routes where horses couldn't go during that film to avoid being seen by Sauron and the Ring Wraiths. In this series, they copied the aesthetic without understanding it. But despite that, this part felt to me maybe the closest that this show has ever felt to the Peter Jackson Lord of the Rings films. I think the reason why is that we actually see someone undergoing a journey with a purpose in this episode. We see something approximating an actual quest, instead of just teleporting around. It never occurred to me before quite how important the journey is in Lord of the Rings. And The Hobbit as well, I suppose. It's the journey and what happens along the way that makes the story. And I was kind of even feeling the Rings of Power for a moment during this, but the show never seems to take the time to build characters. Granted, the show was frenziedly hurling diversity at the camera yet again, like it was a replacement for writing characters, and it isn't. We have a group of elves with a level of diversity that makes them look like the Power Rangers lineup. But what multiple of them didn't get were names, or many lines of dialogue, or characters. As far as I can tell, this guy's name was Token Black. I think they may have let the female Asian elf speak once or twice, and the black male elf got a few lines and a scream. Is racism solved yet? How many POC elves do we need to cast before racism's solved? It kind of brings up problems, because if this is supposed to be in canon with the Peter Jackson films, where did all the elven minorities go before Lord of the Rings? Valinor, or did the Elven King just use them as cannon fodder in an upcoming battle? Where did they all go? But despite all of that, I was feeling it. The small group of elves were trying to get to Eregion. The main route was blocked due to a destroyed bridge, and despite Galadriel's warnings, Elrond was going to march their group into a trap, and it kind of had my interest. Then as usual, it cut away to an altogether different storyline and it lost me immediately. It cut to Gandalf meeting Tom Bombadil. Yes, they really put in Tom sodding Bombadil, and for that part they got Rory Kinnear from the Royal Shakespeare Company to play Tom Bombadil.
Pardon me, I don't suppose you've seen a pair of halflings come this way?
See, you found the goat.
And then it cuts to the hobbit things that had been blown away by a magical whirlwind, got lost and met some long lost other hobbit things, and I literally couldn't care less about the hobbit things. Every time the show gets close to having a serious tone, or builds any kind of drama, the hobbit things bungle in and ruin it to start falling over, eating beetles or singing about snails. I was kind of getting into the Elrond and Galadriel storyline, and the show then didn't go back for another 20 minutes, and by then the episode had completely lost me again. By the time it went back to Elrond and Galadriel, I was done.
What is this place? I feel no rest here. Even the trees seem ill at ease.
Dive on! Don't let go!
This is all the lines this character got. So when he gets got by some Barrow Wights in a trap, ghosts, spectres, revenants, so yeah, Token Black gets done in by the Wights, pun entirely intended. Elrond walked them into the same trap that the messengers had gone into off camera and got done in. And how did he do that? I don't know. He walked into it off camera as well. How did Sauron even set this trap up? I don't know. That happened off camera as well. The Wights do in Token, who from the subtitles is called Daymore, and why should I care? There's no real impact to his loss because they never spent any time building this character. Just compare this to Boromir meeting his end in the Peter Jackson films and you'll see exactly why Rings of Power falls so short. The elves' weapons do nothing to the Wights, but the elves are saved by Elrond, who knows that the Wights can only be hurt by the weapons they were buried with. So they open a burial mound, get weapons, and the elves defeat the Wights. That scene lasted 5 minutes, and then we cut away again for another quarter of an hour to instead follow Isildur and then the Hobbit things again. We then get a 2-minute conversation between Galadriel and Elrond that also adds nothing. Then one of the no-name elves comes in and interrupts to say they've heard drums. Then we cut away again for another 10 minutes to go back to Isildur. And when we come back to Galadriel, it's night again. How long have they been travelling since the start of this episode? No idea. Absolutely no idea. Not only did the elves fail to spot an army of orcs marching into their lands, the orcs were beating drums while they were doing it. The orc army is heading to the elven city of Eregion, and on the way they're hunting horses. One of the orcs fires an arrow, misses the horse, but in the whole empty woods manages to hit one of the diversity elves in the chest. Galadriel then tries to comfort him, and the ring she's wearing heals him. Galadriel then sends the others to go back and warn the Elven King to not send the Elven army out to sea in ships to sail past a giant ship-destroying sea monster to attack the orcs who aren't even there any longer, and instead send the army to Eregion. Galadriel then tries to solo the entire orc army. This show is very silly. Galadriel immediately gets herself surrounded and then gets captured by Adar. It's just so dumb. The correct approach for her maybe would have been reconnaissance, maybe try to find their leader and put an arrow through his head from range. I even would have accepted her doing a Legolas and kiting the orcs while firing arrows at them. One of the people I watched it with then asked, is she on Beric the horse right now? And sadly I doubt it, because last time we saw him, Beric was on the other side of the continent. But in this show, that doesn't really rule it out because it happens all the time. Beric also may be a better fighter than Galadriel. At least Beric knows when to pull back when he's outmanned. Considering how important it is that this news gets to the king, Galadriel probably should have gone with the others in case they got attacked on the way. I think part of the problem is that this show may be too short to enable the scope of the story they have in mind. They probably needed 20 or 24 episodes a season for this, because there are 4 separate stories in this episode and they're all half-baked. Elrond and Galadriel is plot 1. In plot 2, Gandalf follows the stars in the sky, then follows a goat and meets Tom Bombadil, tries to break off a tree branch, gets eaten by a tree, and Tom tells him that it's his job to defeat the Dark Wizard and Sauron. In plot 3, the Hobbit things wake up in a desert where they landed after being blown away by a magic whirlwind. They survived somehow off camera. They're being tracked by the bad guys in bug masks when they happen upon a diverse Hobbit thing who they follow back to his diverse village of other Hobbit things, and they find out that they all may be related. An ancestor of Lenny Henry apparently came from this village and took a caravan of settlers to go looking for the Shire. Never made it, and instead they became nomads. In plot 4, Isildur and Arondir take a group from Pelargir to go looking for Theo, who I suspected was taken by tree men last episode. Isildur is starting to fall for the woman who stabbed him last episode. Arondir exposes her as having a brand that means she swore allegiance to Adar and the bad guy orcs, and ties her hands before she stabs anyone else, and they go on searching for Theo. Isildur then steps into quicksand, doesn't listen to Arondir, flails around like an idiot, and him and Arondir get eaten by a giant worm.
Be still.
I said it's all right.
Give me your hand.
Stabby Girl prods the worm with a stick, it comes back out, and Arondir cuts his way through its stomach. Then night falls off camera, Isildur frees the girl's hands, she pulls a sword on him and gets twatted by an angry tree man. In reality, she'd probably be done, but she shakes it off. The tree men are mad because orcs and wildmen have been cutting their forest down and they don't like axes and swords. Arondir then uses his elf powers of ultimate blandness to make friends with the trees. Isildur is about to get romantic with Stabby Girl when the tree men release Theo and the wild men captives, and among the wild men is Stabby's missing fiancée. So Isildur loses the girl and everyone is friendly, having seemingly forgotten that the wild men group was going to cut their throats just last episode. Plots 2, 3 and 4 in this episode were pretty much a complete waste of time.
See, you found the goat.
If you only knew the power of one, the power of two, the power of many.